My framework is to own what you can control in the process. Being able to know what you're opening with and know what you're moving towards next. It's very simple, but it's what a lot of people missed. I think sales, there's the art and there's the science. People don't close if they think you need it more than they do. You're going to drive value to the person who is saying yes, and they can't get that value without what you're offering. Getting the job selling private jets for Warren Buffett was one of the hardest sales processes I ever went through. I still believe that pressing flesh, as we used to say, shaking hands, it matters.
Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I met you 12 or so years ago.
Yeah.
And you were my first introduction to people in this world who have crazy stories. Before then, I had just read about people like you. And then you told me, I said, tell me a bit about yourself, Andy. And you said, first I sold private jets. I sold a company to Facebook. And then what was after that?
After that was we sold Waze to Google.
Oh, right. Then then I sold a company to Google. And I was like, who is this guy? You're like in your early 30s.
Yeah. It was, I learned early on in my career and early on in my life that I really enjoyed convincing people of things. And later on in life, I learned that that's called sales. And I think that there's two types of people in this world, people who know they're in sales and people that are in denial that they're in sales. And I think, soon we all kind of just understand that we're all selling something, even if it's an idea, a restaurant recommendation, whatever it is, we're all selling something. If we just kind of get comfortable with that and we understand that that's a skill, we might be able to have a little bit more of what we want and bring people along with us.
So how do you get good at sales? Like if sales is important and we all could use it as a secret weapon, is there a framework for being a pro at sales?
Yeah, there are a lot of frameworks. My TikTok algorithm shows me a lot of different people telling me their framework for sales. My framework is to own what you can control in the process. That there's so much in a process of convincing somebody of something, or convincing them to join your team or buy your product or think your idea is worth another piece of the conversation, to just own the part of it that you can control. So my first job out of college was selling life insurance. And I have to tell you that life insurance is one of the least sexy things you can possibly sell, because the opening part of the conversation begins, have you recently thought about your death? And then you have to recover from that. And I ended up being the number one life insurance salesman in America in the rookie class when I was 23 years old, because I learned how to own what I could control. And the only thing that I could control in the process it wasn't who said yes, because 1 out of 3 people would say yes. So there's 2 people that I had no control over, their no's. And to get to 3 pitches, I had to start with 10 leads. So there were 7 people who were leads that were not going to ever let me pitch. And so I said, I want X number of sales. So I multiplied the number of pitches I needed to do by 3. And I multiplied that number by 10 to get how many leads I needed to get. And every week, I just went out and made sure I got that many new 10s that would turn into 3s, which would turn into 1s. Because I didn't control who would say yes. I didn't control who would let me pitch. I just controlled making the reach out to the people in there. And for different parts of our lives, we're going to go through different amounts of 10 3s and 1s in dating. You got to kiss a lot of frogs sometimes to find the person who you want to spend a little bit more time with, to, in your case, find the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. Congratulations, by the way. And it's a process, right? But it's not everything's a funnel. It doesn't have to be unsexy, but it does break down to, number of people we spoke to, number of people we spent time with, to the one person that we wanted to actually spend a life with.
Not everything's a funnel, but everything's a funnel.
Yes. And so I think that getting good at sales, getting good at being persuasive, getting good at bringing people along with you on a journey, is figuring out which part of that process you're in control of, and then knowing what the next step is after that, after the part that you're in control of, right? So in sales, it's you make a pitch or you make a presentation. In recruiting, it's you put together an offer. In dating, it's you ask for the next date. Being able to know what you're opening with and know what you're moving towards next is what a lot of people, it's very simple, but it's what a lot of people missed. I've been on sales calls, a lot of sales calls where I've had people say, "So what do you think?" And I said, "Sounds like an amazing opportunity." And they said, "Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for your time." And I was like, I haven't said yes yet. I just paid you a compliment. Like, you have to ask for the business. And that's what separates, you have to ask for the next step. And that's what separates people who have dabbled with the skill of sales from people who haven't really perfected it.
When I was a teenager, I realized the importance of sales. You know, I don't know. I was a weird teenager, I guess. And I was selling agency services at the time. My top of the funnel was I'd add people on LinkedIn, I'd get their email address, and then I'd basically say, "Hey, like, I looked at your website, kind of sucks. I can make it better. Here's how I would do it." I basically, this was like pre Calendly and stuff like that. I'd say, "Here's my phone number, call me anytime." Like the access, like, just here's my phone number, call me anytime. I realized I was closing no one basically on these phone calls. Maybe it was my prepubescent voice,
Right.
or maybe I couldn't get my story tight enough. So I found this guy who, he was 31, 32 at the time. He had built a big agency, and I basically said, "Hey, would you be willing to sit on 5 or 10 or 15 of my calls,
Yeah.
write notes, and tell me all the things I'm doing poorly?" And he did that for 8, 9, 10 calls, gave me notes, paid him for his time.
Okay.
Those sets of notes, like, for me, like, changed the whole course of my life.
Right.
So what do you think about that? What do you think about people giving you notes on sales calls? Like, is it, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think sales, there's the art and there's the science, right? The science is, the law of large numbers, 10, 3 to 1, right? The art is making it, 5, 3 to 1, right? So instead of having 10 leads, I get you 3 pitches to get you 1, right? Being able to reduce the spread of reduce the magnitude of the funnel is the art that happens. And that's where a mentor can be just years ahead of what you'd be able to figure out on your own. You will figure it out on your own. Like, everybody can figure it out on their own if they get enough at bats. But if you can, wisely get somebody to give you notes and say, "Hey, here's what I heard you say, and here's what you could have said." Hey, you get really excited when they start to agree with you, and you're almost like that guy at the bar that needs to get laid, and like they're like, "Oh my gosh, he really needs this sale." Like, people don't close if they think you need it more than they do, right? If it's your agenda versus theirs, they're like, "Oh, ooh, this is not going to be good for me." You know what? But if you look like you've done this a million times, just a part of the process, this is what we do next. You kind of guide them through those steps. Those are the types of notes that somebody who's done this a lot can give you, and maybe speed up your close ratio and the art side of your sales.
Is there a difference between selling a $10,000 website or a $1 billion app to Google? For example, when you sold Waze to Google?
The fundamentals are almost the same. You're going to drive value to the person who is saying yes, and they can't get that value without what you're offering. If that's the way that you frame it, right? That, what I raised over $100 million of venture funding for companies, or I've been a part of companies that have raised over 100 million, and then now as a coach, getting close to $1 billion of funding that's come into companies that I have been a part of in some way, shape, or form. All of that, when positioned as an opportunity for somebody to participate in the upside, to go on the journey to be on the rocket ship, is the same as me starting off my career selling lawn mowing services in Dallas, Texas. There is something that I was offering to do that this person either didn't want to or couldn't do themselves. And I had built the infrastructure of the company, the offering that they were excited about. And they said, "You know what, for the time that I'm going to get back, you mowing my lawn versus me mowing my lawn, that's worth $20. Sure." And if you can kind of break it down on the value exchange, and you kind of come at people as, I have something and you have something. I have the thing you want, you have the thing I want. You have money, I have services. Should we bring those two together? Do we both feel good about this? Fantastic. Let's move on. That is what most of the negotiations that I've ever been a part of that moved forward that was the spirit or the feeling that was in the room, was everybody was getting what they wanted and they were willing to part with what they had.
Do you remember a particular time where it was like one of the hardest negotiations of your life or one of the hardest sales of your life, and it just sticks in your brain as like a marquee moment?
Getting the job selling private jets for Warren Buffett was one of the hardest sales processes I ever went through, because the guys that ran the company were literally the 40 best sales guys in America. And so to convince a sales guy to let you be a sales guy with them is a really arduous process, because they, like, you're the guy who gave you notes, that was very nice of him. These guys are not giving me notes after we finish an interview, right?
Right.
They're not being kind until once I got on the team. Awesome, best people in the world, right? A lot of people know Jesse Itzler, right? Jesse was my boss,
Yeah.
when I was selling private jets, and like watching him operate up close and in person was like incredible. And the whole team at Marquis Jet back in 2006 to 2009 was like Jesse and baby Jesse's, right? And like to get to be a part of that crew for a few years and like run the Texas sales region for Warren Buffett's private jet company was absolutely what I wanted to do. But I think it took me three tries to get in there and to like show them how hard I was willing to work. Show them, they said we only hire people with 15 years of sales experience, and I said, well, I started my lawn mowing company when I was 12, 26 now, so like I'm just 1 year shy. And they're like, no, that doesn't count. But they ended up hiring me when I was 28. But being able to be one of the youngest guys on the team was totally worth all the effort that I put into it, and all the I'm going to be in New York for meetings, and I just flew and hung out outside their office and waited until I could get somebody on the phone and be like, hey, I'm actually nearby. Could I swing by to continue the conversation that we were having? I sent my business plan to 5 different hotels in San Francisco, knowing that the CEO was going to be in San Francisco. I knew he'd only stay at one of 5 hotels. And he called me. He goes, how'd you get this into my room? Those were the types of things that I was trying to do to just show them like I'll do this to get the job. Imagine what I will do.
One of the ways I got to know you actually was you were throwing a dinner called the Good People Dinner.
Good people, great dinner.
I was living in Montreal at the time, and you like sent an email. You're like, yeah, I'm having a dinner tomorrow or something. You should come by. And I remember looking, I was in college at the time, and I remember looking at flights, and it was like, for whatever reason, it was like, I don't know, $2,000 or super expensive. And I was like, oh, a part of me is like, I shouldn't do this, but I take out my credit card, I swipe it, I show up to the dinner, and I end up like from that dinner, I met you, which has been super fruitful, but also met like a bunch of like lifelong friends
Yeah.
from that dinner. So I feel like one of the biggest hacks when I look back at my career, one of the biggest hacks is just being like, yeah, I'm in town, totally. Like, get on the plane. Like, that's one of the biggest sales hacks is just being okay to get on a plane and acknowledging that it's a funnel. Like, not every dinner is going to be amazing and not every meeting is going to work, but you have to be willing to get on a plane.
Yeah. I am in London right now. I got here this morning. I knew that this call was still scheduled. I made sure that my flights were around us to be able to have this conversation. And there was a meeting that last week I found out about, and they're like, "Do you want to Zoom or are you guys based in London or where?" I was like, "Oh, I'm actually going to be in London next week," because you don't get the opportunity that I had this morning to meet with the person I met with in person. And I still believe that pressing flesh, as we used to say, shaking hands, like, it matters. There's certain times when it matters, and there are certain things that will happen in a room that you just can't pick up on Zoom. And it's not everything. I am very grateful to not be traveling 200 days a year like I used to, but there's a threshold that I will hop on a plane and I'll be back in New York, a couple days, but totally worth it to hop across the pond for the meeting I had this morning and another one tomorrow.
I think there's a story with you and I want to say someone at Coca-Cola or Delta and you missed a flight. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. Yeah. I was Speaking at MIT, I'd been invited to join this panel, and it was in a panel of academics, and I'm, you know, a homeschool kid from Texas that got a finance degree from Texas A&M, and these are like double Ivies, right? Everybody's intellectually like they're the ones who should be speaking at MIT, and I did a lot of prep work for this panel. I knew everything about all of their businesses, but I wanted, I wanted it to be friendly and cordial, but I love panels where you can disagree just enough to spark a conversation. And so I did that on a couple points that I thought, this for the audience would be great. I'm in, I'm rushing back to New York, and I hear behind me, "Hey, really enjoyed what you shared today." And a gentleman who I had not seen before at the auditorium. And so as we're like literally repacking our bags after having gone through TSA, I was like, "Hey, by the way, my name is Andy." He goes, "Oh, my name's Neil." I was like, what were you up here for? He goes, "Oh, I just got hired as the new head of digital for Coca-Cola, and I'm trying to learn as fast as I can. I'm working for a startup that would very much like to be involved with Coca-Cola at the time." And I said, "Oh, what stood out to you from today?" So he starts to talk, and we're kind of walking together towards the gate, and I'm not late for my flight, but I'm pretty close to late. Like boarding is happening pretty soon. And I say, "Would you like to get a beer?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I'm here actually early, so sure." And so we're sitting at the pub or Boston Airport bar, and I can hear them paging my name, passenger Ellwood, last call, and I say, "You want another round?" And I know that I'm missing my flight, but I'm keeping my poker face as calm and collected as I can. And so we have a couple of beers. We come up with two ideas. And I said, "Hey, when I get back to New York tomorrow, I'm going to follow up with you on both of those ideas. Does that sound like a great next step for us? This is really productive conversation." And he said, "Absolutely. Thanks so much for the beers." And he walks to his gate, catches his flight, makes it home to his family in Atlanta. And I end up booking like the 11 p.m. puddle jump, and sit middle seat, which I'm not a middle seat type guy. But got that connection, and was able to do one of those ideas with Coca-Cola. And my favorite part is that I later hired him to be the CMO of my last startup. And it was his way 6 years later to leave Coca-Cola. He'd served his time. He'd done what he wanted to do at Coca-Cola. And he came in and, was CMO for a little bit, and then said, "Hey, startup life really isn't for me." But he launched his own agency, and now it's one of the most successful digital agencies, boutique digital agencies in Atlanta. And all because I just was willing to miss a flight and buy a couple beers.
And you never know who you're going to sit next to in life, right?
Yeah.
And so let me tell you a story like that. So I'm flying home from Vegas, CES,
Okay. Yeah.
when I was living in San Francisco. So Las Vegas to San Francisco, back row, middle seat. And I have this guy next to me who is like, keeps like basically sleeping on me. He's just like going on my chair, and I'm kind of like lightly moving him to my right, coming on my chair. It's Vegas, right? He was probably up for 32 hours, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know who I was sitting next to, right? So, and I'm a positive guy, and anyways, I started talking to him. I was like, "Hey, like, are you okay? Like, you've been kind of like coming in my seat." So, "Oh, I'm so tired. I had such a bit busy CES." We start talking. Turns out he's a co-founder of Lyft.
Wow.
And yeah, he's a co-founder of Lyft. And we get talking, and he's like, telling me he's just, "Oh, I'm so tired, but I'm excited to play tennis when I get back." I was like, "Oh, we should play tennis sometime." And all of a sudden I have this relationship with the co-founder of a multi-billion-dollar company who, like, to this day, like, I have that relationship with.
Yeah.
And the lesson really for me was always lead with kindness and positivity, and you never know who's sitting next to you.
100%. In situations like that, when you lead with kindness and positivity, how do you know to continue it? Right? Like how long did it take for you to get to he's the co-founder of Lyft? Because he didn't probably lead with that.
It only at the end of the flight did he tell me he was the co-founder of Lyft. So only after we had talked about tennis, like I was playing tennis with him even before I knew he was the co-founder of Lyft.
Wow. Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we were talking about tennis, but there was something inside me that was like, there's something interesting about this guy.
Yeah.
And there's something that I was just following my curiosity. Like I really, I'm sure you feel this a lot of the time when you meet someone and you can kind of just sense that like, oh, there's something to this person, and you can't put your finger on it. I had that same feeling with him, and as we're getting up off the plane, he's like, "Oh, by the way, you're in tech, right?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "I think you might know of the company that I started."
Wow.
Uh, and he's like, "It's Lyft."
Wow. I have always admired your curiosity and your willingness to test things. I followed you into the 1 million follower AI challenge on TikTok. And I just crossed over 500 followers last week. So, didn't quite make it
Love
either.
it.
But where does curiosity show up the most for you?
I think curious people are curious everywhere. Like it isn't something that is siloed into relationships or, just when you go out to, I just grabbed a coffee right before this at the coffee shop and like started talking to the barista about real estate in this particular town that I'm in. Like I just feel like curious people are curious people. I've learned that when you're curious, it increases your, what people call the luck surface area. Like you become more lucky if you're curious. That being said, you also get burned and rejected 100 times more
Right.
when you're curious, right? So like you have to be okay with being burnt. And I have plenty of examples of like, yeah, I was curious and I got rejected or burnt and it sucked.
Right. It sounds like curiosity came first, but then an ability to deal with rejection came second.
Yeah, yeah, I think I don't know. I was always taught like to go out and from my parents and grandparents to go out in the world and be okay with rejection. So as a child, I was just like, okay, rejection is a part of life, right? Like it is, and if you're not getting rejected, then you're not doing life properly. Just like if you're not breathing, something is wrong. If you believe that rejection is a part of life, then the next step is, okay, well, I want to be curious about the world around me and I'm going to go try a bunch of different things. And then I just learned that like the coolest people on this planet are the most curious people on this planet and have collected the most interesting experiences like
Yeah.
you. And that's what drew me to you. What
Right.
drew me to you is you told me about stories and experiences that at that point I had only read about in books. And I don't believe you can be an interesting person if you're not curious.
I completely agree with that. And I think that dealing with rejection and curiosity, I find are they just go hand in hand with my favorite people. And I think that I actually, if I were to drill back, because I don't know about you, but I've recently moved on from some friendships and relationships that, not because they're a bad person, but they just stopped. Like actually, the way I broke it down was they just stopped being curious, and they just kind of said, "No, I understand the world now,"
Right.
and like, and that like that was it. Like they're like, "This is as far as I go," and I'm like, "Well, I'm still going," and they're like, "But dude, why don't we hang out anymore?" I was like, "Because we're talking about the exact same thing that we were talking about like 6 months ago. Like
Yeah.
what's new in your world?" I'm still just frustrated about that thing that happened. Like I'm frustrated about the thing that happened yesterday, but not that thing. And I'm curious if because you're kind of at the spot, in your professional world where people who come along and people who have said I'm good, and I'm curious if that's true for you in the way it has been for me.
So I've actually had a lot of epiphanies around friendships since COVID, and even a little bit before COVID, and I'll give you them. So one of them, and I actually have a note in my iPhone. I'm going to pull it up. 2019, I felt like I can walk around San Francisco and I knew everyone. People would like wave to me, and I knew all the cool restaurants and the bars, and they'd let me in, and I just like I really felt that I'd come here years before and I'd gotten to know people there.
Yeah.
And I almost like I had the key to the city. And one day I realized, and this is when I wrote this note, I said, SF, the city where everyone knows you, but it's the loneliest city on the planet.
Wow.
And the reason I had that epiphany is, I think Eric Clapton covered this song. It's called Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. And I don't know the original songwriter, but the basic idea is that, like, as soon as you're not cool in San Francisco for whatever reason, your quote unquote friends all of a sudden disappear. Your company runs out of cash and you have to close down. You're, you know, something happens. You're doing crypto when it's no longer cool. You're doing AI when it's no longer cool, right? Like, for whatever reason you're out of favor. Watch how these people that you met in a place like San Francisco, like how often they're going to text you. So that was one big epiphany,
Yeah.
was that the people that I considered professional friends, a lot of them were merely there just because they're climbing their own ladders. And the second thing
I heard somebody say, people don't want to be a part of the process; they want to be a part of the outcome.
Right, totally. And then the second thing is, at COVID, during COVID, I actually reconnected with my old like high school and grade school friends, and I started this like group chat with like a bunch of them. They haven't sold companies for $1 billion to Google. They are just regular people, with no audiences, never started a company, never sold a company, read about venture capital maybe, but don't know really what it is, and just out of our world. And I realized that those people, like salt of the earth people, like that, they don't care like if I sell a company or I have 1 million followers or don't. They just they just like me for whatever reason. So that was a big epiphany around friendship. That was number
Yeah.
2.
Has that continued post pandemic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Awesome.
I would say like I have like 2 groups of friends now. I basically like have a smaller group of professional friends that are the people that might have been in SF but were actually my friends. So I've trimmed that down from, I don't know, a big number to 5, and I trimmed and then I have this new new/old group of friends
Right.
that I've rekindled.
You've built so many communities quickly. What part of those 2 truths, right, about the San Francisco friends and the old friends informs the way that you think about the new communities that you're building now?
Well, I think some of the communities that we build the quickest end up falling the quickest. With respect to communities, when you build a community really quickly, you should actually be really cautious. Like, great communities aren't built quickly; they're built slowly over time and compounded.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest lesson there, is that like I'd rather a community grow 10 to 20% a month,
Right.
not 200% or 2000% a month.
Right.
And I just think that that's just a more sustainable way to grow a community. And that's why I think I'm not a huge fan of venture capital and like venture funding communities, because I think what venture is I want to grow this as quick as possible. But the greatest communities, it's oil and water with that.
There's a psychologist from the 70s and 80s, a Canadian psychologist named Scott Peck. And he's written a handful of books, but in one of his books, The Road Less Traveled, he talks about the 4 stages of community. And he breaks them down into pseudo community, chaos, anger, and true community. The pseudo community is, we both have this thing that we like in common. We both like AI. We're in a community together. Hey, like, awesome. Community for people that like AI. And then you start to get to know people in the community, and you're like, wait a second, you disagree with me about a lot of other stuff. And then you go into chaos. And there's like a chaos moment in a community, like small community, big community, where you're like, we don't actually agree on everything. And this happens with like sports fans or people that you went to class with. Like, the thing that brought you together is no longer the only reason that you spend time together. And you're like, man, I totally voted differently than these people, but we both like AI. What am I supposed to do? And then you go through like anger and like despair. You're like, I don't, was any of it real? Like, did any of it matter? But if you can go through that and be like, yeah, but you know what? I still pick them. I still want them to be in my world. Like, yeah, we disagree about 70% of things, but the 30% of things that we agree on, super great. Like, that's where our friendship is built. That's where our relationship is built. That's where our community is built. And that's what we're going to focus on. That's the true community, not where everybody agrees about everything, but there's a guiding set of principles that say, hey, the core basics, we're all in on that piece. It doesn't even have to be. It doesn't even have to be the original thing that brought you together. Like the way that we're operating is we're operating as a curious community. That's the community we're operating. We just want to keep learning collective knowledge. What does that look like? The topic we all showed up for originally was crypto. Then we moved on to AI, whatever. But we're still learning together, and we're making each other better as a true community. But most people quit somewhere in between chaos and despair.
You said something. You asked a really interesting question when I was talking about the Lyft co-founder. You said, when did you know that he was the Lyft co-founder?
Yeah.
Which is a really astute question. And it relates to this because when you're meeting people within the professional context and you know what they're doing right away, it's very hard to build long-lasting community because you might be, being friends with someone because they're the CMO of Nike or something like that. I want to tell you a story about last week. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I went to a religious event, and the leader of this community was like, "Hey, like, I've never seen you here. Would you like to have dinner with my wife and myself and a few other friends who are in from out of town?" I said, I'm a curious guy, right? I'm like, sure. So I show up. It's a 4-hour dinner. Not once did anyone at the table ask me what I do. It was just not at all. It didn't even pop into it. And by the end of this meal, like, I felt like these were my brothers and sisters. So I think there's a lot that we can learn about community building from religion.
I grew up a very religious person and have had a wandering journey. Some might call it a prodigal son journey of my own, where I was like, okay, yeah, I understand all that now. Like, I know how to win at church. I'll see you later. And I kind of peaced out for a while. Well, I'll just say I peaced out for a while because that's just like every single person I knew growing up believed the exact same things that I believed. And
totally.
And they, truthfully, a lot of them still do. And so when I go home, they similarly, to your friends at home, don't really know what I do, don't really understand a lot of those conversations, but they do ask a lot, like, which church are you going to in New York, right? Like, it's the thing that they know to ask. And I'm not really that great of friends with a lot of those people anymore. But in thinking about communities that are not built around what can I get out of this, but what can I give to this?
Right.
Which is what I think at its pinnacle, at its best, is what religious communities that I've had the opportunity to observe exhibit. I think there's a chance for religion 3.0. If I go through my Rolodex of founders, the number of founders that I know who grew up with some amount of religion in their life, pretty high. Like, it's north of 70%. Like, they grew up believing in something that they couldn't see. And so they're pretty comfortable being the startup founder because they're believing in something they can't see. This idea of faith is not weird to them. They're like, hey, I spent my entire high school going to youth group on Sunday nights talking about things that I've never seen. But it made me feel something. So cool. And they pursued other things in their life that take some faith. But I think that there were so many bad actors and so many, I don't want to say scandals, but so many reasons to like walk away from organized religion that people just like baby with the bathwater, throw the whole thing out. Good, bad, and definitely the ugly. And we just all went internal to work on ourselves. And the past 20 years, 25 years has just been, but the spirituality of you. What are you? You are the God inside of yourself. And what I'm seeing in a lot of conversations I'm having is people looking to be part of something bigger than themselves that will outlast them. And they're realizing it's not their startup, and it's not their newsletter, and it's not, whatever thing that they're working on right now. They know it probably won't outlast them. And it definitely is not a global worldwide thing, right? The chances of doing that we all believed Silicon Valley, or we all believed the social network, and we're like, oh my god, if Zuck can do it, I can definitely do it. Like I'm much more well spoken than that guy was. And now we're kind of like, no, we're building things that give us joy, and communities that are more about giving, I think are going to have a really big rise in popularity.
I mean, I think that's why Burning Man took off. Like, look at the popularity of Burning Man, like 20 years ago versus today, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger. Have you been to Burning Man?
I've been one time.
And like, describe what your Burning Man experience was and why it's a great example of community.
Yeah. But I'll just describe it and explain why I'm going back this year. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So I had been invited to go quite a few times, and the idea of truthfully taking that much time to be literally off the grid, right? Because cell phones don't work there, and there's no money there, and everything's a barter system, and there's not really like hours in a day. There's just, what do you feel like doing? Like, if you want to sleep, you can sleep. If you want to stay up all night, you can stay up all night. I watched the sunrise 8 days in a row. Right? The last 2 times I had not gone to sleep in between. Like I just watched. They call it the double sunrise, and like sober. Like I was not enhancing myself to make sure that I stayed up again. I just was like, I finally clicked. And so I was, I had 2 friends that were my sponsors. They said, hey, we're going to help you with all, it takes a little bit to figure out how to get there and what you need to pack. And then they just kind of like got me there, and we're friendly for the first day. And they're like, all right, go experience it. And talk about a place where you can be curious, because everybody there is just fascinated by everybody else there. And a city of 80,000 people pops up in less than 2 weeks and disappears in less than 2 weeks. And in the process, you have everything that you need if you fully present and fully there. And no one knew what my name was. My playa name, they call it the playa. My playa name was Boots. They had no idea what I did outside of Burning Man. They didn't know my real name. They didn't know what my company was. They didn't know truthfully where I lived. I was just a guy named Boots who was there for some music, there to play some games, eat some food, host a happy hour, whatever it was, ride our bikes. The 3rd day that I was there, I went to one of my friends, and this guy had been like 10 times, 12 times. And after 3 days, I was like, okay, so I've had enough. What do we do for like the next 5 days? Like, I get it. But like, I don't want to do this for another 5 days. And he said, Andy, do you have a handful of friends here? I was like, yeah. He goes, do you have more than a handful of friends here? I was like, yeah. He goes, do they come multiple times? I was like, yeah. He goes, is it possible that in 3 days you have not yet discovered what they've discovered that makes them want to come back every year? And I was like, so 3 days is it enough to understand Burning Man? What? And that moment was just a pivotal moment for me, that I was like, be more curious. What am I not seeing? And so I started going off by myself more often. I started introducing myself to people who I didn't know and had no idea, and I just started being uber curious. And day 4.5, like, if I could have, I just would have stayed for another 3 weeks, because I started to unlock the spirit of curiosity. And it's just, it's like you're on another planet, and everything else just kind of fades away. And there are people who definitely enhance their experience, and people who, that's what they're there for. But I think that overall, Burning Man, in my experience, gets a bad rap for that. That there's you're high, but it's not on a supply, right? You're high on just this experience, and like, they call, when you leave Burning Man, they call it going back to the default world, right? Because like, you kind of, you logged in, you found this place, and then you disappear, back into the default world. And for a lot of people, it is a version of a religion that they need it once a year. They need that fix.
Yeah, I wonder, what I don't like about it is it's once a year, it's a pilgrimage to Mecca, but you go back to your life and then you get back into your routines. Like, I wonder how you can incorporate like that same lessons in your in your everyday life. It sounds like you are doing a bit of it, but it feels like a lot of people I know who go to Burning Man are just like, they go, they have a great time, and then they leave.
Yeah, on my final day when we were cleaning up camp, I said to a new friend of mine, I said to her, I said, I have so many things I want to do when I get back. What am I supposed to do with this feeling of like, I got clarity on a decent amount of things because I was not around those things. I was completely detached from any interaction with those things, with those projects, with those people. And I said, and she said, write it all down as explicitly as you possibly can, and then wait 30 days. And if you still want to do any of those things, do it on the 31st day. And it was such great advice because it allowed the experiences I had to metastasize into wisdom, into ideas, into action. But it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I just heard this quote, I'm going to go tell the whole world. Oh my gosh, I just had this experience. I'm moving to Switzerland. Like, no, it was, okay, I know what my urge is, but I was able to kind of sit with it and say, like, what actually is that? And in that next 30 days, I ended a 14-year friendship, logged out of a company that I was considering spending more time investing in myself. I said, that's not, I like it, but I don't love it. I decided to marry my girlfriend, which I did, 4 years later. Like I made a lot of decisions coming off of that, like being logged out state. And it wasn't because of Burning Man. I'm not telling, you or your audience or anybody to like, you have to go. But for me, it was what you said. It was a version of, love as a service, right? A version of community at its best. That, I saw a different side of people in those moments.
I'm wondering if that's something that you should be doing monthly, weekly, quarterly. How do you think about that?
So I have a pretty active journaling practice. And for me, the act of slowing down long enough to write what I'm thinking forces my brain out of its normal routines. And it's not the full Burning Man experience, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But it for me forces me to think differently because I'm slowing down long enough to actually choose the words and put them on a page. I don't, a lot of people are like, oh, there's so many cool journaling apps, and there's, if that's your thing, like just journal, like that's the most important thing. But like for me, it's slowing down to actually pen to paper, seeing each letter as it comes out. I take, as long as it takes, to fill the page. And that for me is a little bit of logging out because I'm choosing what is worthy of making it on the paper. And I don't write for a certain duration. I don't care how many pages I write. Yesterday morning I wrote 2 sentences. That was it. That's all I needed. But I had a place for the thought. I had a place for like, hey, let that sit there outside of my head and let it be something that might turn into something and might not. And, I have kind of a graveyard of projects and a graveyard of blog posts and a graveyard of newsletter headlines that like I wrote them down and I was like, okay, I know why I thought that was good, but now that it's outside of my head, it's not as good as I thought it was. But sometimes it takes externalizing those thoughts. And for me, to paper, for me to really get clarity on like, all right, it sounded clever to me when it was, rattling around in my head, but that's not actually the thing. But maybe it's by getting it out of my head, I open up a little space for the thing to slot in, right? There's a little more space. I thank you for your advice. And, it's been super fun for me launching my YouTube channel 4 months ago. And, I think one of my videos is about to cross 100 views. So, cool. But like the process of making these videos every week, the process of having that content out there I've never written more. I've never had more ideas than I do right now because of just taking things that had been sitting and I externalize them. And now they exist in the world. And if somebody wants to know what I think about things, there's a lot of stuff out there, in the newsletter and on the YouTube channel. And I'm doing it, and it's as close to therapy as I've experienced by just creating. And I'm getting to know myself better in the process.
So I don't do any journaling, although I do have like a notes folder, ideas folder, and stuff like that. If I wanted to get into journaling tomorrow, let's say every morning, to me, staring at a blank page is a bit overwhelming. Like, what advice do you have to someone who is afraid of the blank page?
I think it's the number one reason people don't journal is afraid of the blank page, or they've not ascribed value to their own thoughts. One of those two.
Well, the second one is like a bigger problem. It's like,
yeah,
no, Like your thoughts are valuable, period. Like,
Yeah, no, and I've seen people unlock that belief in themselves through journaling,
yeah.
but it was the reason that they didn't to start. And so to start, one of the things that I've done and still from time to time do is, my full name is Andrew Thomas Ellwood, right? And I have Andrew Thomas Ellwood write Andy a note as if he was Andy's executive coach. Dear Andy, here's what I observed this week. Here's the things that it seems like you're spending a lot of time on. Here's the questions that I'd love to see how you would answer. And it doesn't have to be, writing the letters to yourself. Like, you could think about, dear future biographer, this week was really interesting for me. And here's why. The book Titan is I think, one of the best business biographies out there. It's still the Life and Times of John D. Rockefeller. But the Rockefeller Foundation gave the author 2 years full access to John D. Rockefeller's journals. And so this book is unreal because it's literally pulled from the journals. And it doesn't have to be that she thinks somebody's going to write a biography about you, but you're capturing those moments. And it's like, well, wait, how would I explain that critical thing that happened recently? Like, here's a story I've told my friends, but what's the story that I would tell my future self that was going back and saying, like, what was going on in 2023? Oh, wait, that's what I thought happened? Interesting. And so I'm on journal number 20 in the series that I'm on. And, everything that's happened since my first startup to now is in those 20 journals.
My last company, Islands, one of our investors was the co-founder of 24 Hour Fitness. They basically invented gyms, like membership gyms, in the early 80s. I went to go visit the co-founder. I just give him an update about, we had this acquisition offer from Facebook, and I was so excited. And I asked him, and I said, what's your biggest regret in your career? And he goes, my biggest regret is just not writing it all down daily. And I said the same thing. I was like, yeah, but like, I just don't know. I hate staring at a blank page. I don't know what I'd write down. And he starts laughing. He goes, this story about going to Facebook and like getting an offer is insane. This is obviously not going to happen every day, but even in your, that's a big moment. Even in your little moments of you going to the coffee shop and you have a conversation with the barista, that itself is an interesting potential story. Journaling to me sounds like I just personally like have to get past. I just have to do it. I just have to like. I feel like for me, buy a journal that I look for. Buy a pen and buy a journal that I'm excited to open and use. I talked about this. I actually tweeted about this the other day where I want to double down on my YouTube. So I went and bought like the dopest YouTube camera, equipment, studio, that sort of thing. And now I'm on the hook to record. So I think the question is, how do you put yourself to be on the hook for journaling? Because it's your accountability is to yourself because it's a personal thing.
I forget whose quote it is, but something along the lines of, you wait until you're motivated. How cute. Action begets action. Real winners just do it. And then they start to feel motivated as they go. And I think that if you just started, you said, similar to, the founder of 24 Hour Fitness, similar to what, like the reason I show up every Tuesday and Friday for my boxing workout is not because I actually enjoy working out. I really don't. But I pay my trainer, one, to train me, but more basically just to make sure I'm there.
It's like a babysitter in some ways.
A little bit. Yeah. And I think that if you said, I want to get into journaling, and you reach out to, your inner circle or some of your high school friends and said, hey, for the next 30 days, would you be willing to text me, if you journal, and I'll text you if I journal? And just, you just start there and say, as long as I write one sentence, that's it. One sentence every day, that counts, right? Like for some there's a personal trainer who tells the story that when he's working with people who it's really their first time in the gym, he just asks them the first day to show up, they have a conversation, and then they go stand on the treadmill and turn it on. He goes, okay, that's enough for today. See you tomorrow. And they're like, well, wait, where's the workout? He goes, no, that was it. I want you to show up tomorrow. We'll do more tomorrow, right? And they have the conversation standing on the treadmill, and they walk for 1 minute, right? And I mean, you can ease yourself. If you said, hey, over the next 30 days, I'm going to do one more sentence per day. So day 1, I'm going to write 1 sentence. Day 2, I'm going to write 2 sentences. Day 3, I'm going to write 3 sentences. You would start to realize, oh, but wait, I had more to say than just 2 sentences. I mean, it happens pretty quickly, right? The kind of flexing that muscle. Not to plug, but I put together 30 days of journaling prompts, which are free on my website. You can go there and download them if they want. And I've had a lot of fun, with the responses that people have come up with. They've told me, hey, day 17, that was my favorite. Thanks so much for sending that to me. But because it is for me, I feel like it's a superpower. It's a hack for my life. I don't go anywhere without my journal in my backpack. And it's, something that I've always had, close by, because I'm, and I doodle in it. I take meeting notes in it. I write full journal entries in it. Like, it's all in one place, but it's just kind of the evolution of my brain as I go. And I use a bunch of the notes apps and Notion and the notes app on my phone and like all that too. But those are like for specific things that I want to be thinking about. My journal is just flow of consciousness most of the time.
2 business ideas. One is an online journaling, product that is kind of like social by nature, in the sense that like every day once you press publish, it tells like your friend, so Andy or whoever, you've published, so you stay accountable as a group. And then the other business idea is just like, would I pay $99 a month or whatever, a couple $100 a month, just for the text from Andy or someone like Andy being like, did you write in your journal today? Yeah,
I love that, but I think that what you're tapping into, and this is something that I have journaled about this. I have written this down on more than one occasion. Journaling, truthfully, is a good jump off point, but I think it expands to learning in general, right? Is accountability as a service. So I was homeschooled from 6th grade all the way through high school graduation. And so my mom would give me my assignments on the first of the month, and then it was up to me to just get my stuff done. Like that. And I did not, and I was the eldest child. I'd never, I didn't have friends who, I had a lot of homeschool friends. And when I got to college, people were like, oh my gosh, like he didn't check to see if we did our homework. I was just like, what do you mean you didn't check? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you just, like, it's a sign, you just do it. They're like, you did it? How'd you know? I was like, because it, like he said, and I realized that like time management and just taking like personal responsibility to get the thing done was unique to the way that I started learning in high school. And so college, that part of college was not challenging for me. What I realized, and the more I've thought about like our traditional education system, and when I was seeing everything go online, right? Like right now, there's no reason to go if you know what you want to be when you graduate, because all of it is online for free, and you can just start being the thing like quickly. But the accountability to actually do it is the reason people don't.
Accountability and social aspect, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yep. Yeah. But I think that actually, like, you can get the social aspect by doing the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And talking about it publicly too.
And talking
right?
about it publicly.
Like,
right.
That's why I think that like if you're doing anything, talk about it publicly, because you're going to attract other people that are going to be into it.
Yeah. But I really think that there's, in one of my ideas that I played around with is something that I've done. I don't respond so well to rewards, but I do respond really well to downside, to consequences. So, for example, when I was becoming the #1 life insurance salesman when I was 23, this is in Texas. I'm wearing a full suit, carrying a hard-sided briefcase, and I said, until I make my 20th sale, I have to park on the top floor of the parking garage and take the stairs in Texas in the summer. So literally every single day, as I'm walking up 6 flights of stairs in a suit, carrying a briefcase to my truck, which has been sitting in the hot sun, I'm like, I better freaking make a sale today. I'm so sick of this. And so I thought about that. Another time I set a goal, and my bet was if I lose, I have to donate $1,000 to my rival university's endowment fund. They don't care at all about my $1,000, right? But that was meaningful to me at the time, right? there are things that I was doing that I said, these are the consequences. So I was thinking about this for this accountability app was, if I put $50 on deposit in this service, and I said, if I don't journal every day for the next 30 days, that $50 disappears. You could decide where it goes, or however it sets up. But like, you tell everyone, if I don't journal for the next 30 days, like, this $50 is going to be donated to a campaign for a politician that I don't like. People would be like, dude, are you journaling? Like, make sure you do that. Like, don't donate to that person, right? But like, almost as I did, and it's just like, you get the money back. It's your money. If you do the thing, you can lie and say that you did it. But the whole point is, like, you're putting something at risk. You're putting some price on establishing that habit, and I think that's worth something that I think is totally worth exploring.
Yeah. So setting up, what is that, negative incentives to motivate you to do the thing.
Yeah.
I think it's powerful, and I like that also, just as like a framework for thinking about. So first of all, I think accountability, massively underrated and underpriced.
Yeah.
Underpriced, underrated. And I think negative incentives in our own lives, just thinking about what we can do to keep us responsible is important.
Yeah, and I think that as there's even more and more people that are opting out of the traditional system, whether it be education or professionally, and they're saying, hey, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to do it on my own. A lot of the people that end up going back to the system go back because they didn't have the perseverance, or maybe sometimes the accountability, right? Like, being a solopreneur, like, is pretty lonely, right? Like your team meetings are just every time you look in the mirror. And if you don't do it, you're the only person who knows. Unless you, like you do, say, hey, this is the thing I'm going to try. I'm going to put it out there and see if it works, right? Experiment, fail fast, cool. I didn't get to 1 million followers on TikTok using AI, whatever, right? I'm really excited to see what you do with your YouTube channel. I've been thinking a lot about the, that tweet, but you put a price tag, right? It cost you something to even be able to say, hold me accountable to this.
And that could be a financial cost. It could be a social cost. It could be a time cost. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be money, but there has to be a cost associated with it to you.
Greatness costs something.
And that's why most people aren't great, frankly, because they're not willing to risk it. And I think it's they're not willing, and this goes back to like curiosity, but they're not willing to be curious and fail and get rejected and put themselves out there and do it day after day after day, because that's really what it takes.
Well, and I think that I have friends that are sitting on incredible ideas, but they didn't think that they would do it. And so they kind of limited their options as to their ability to pursue it. And they have big boy budgets. I mean, like, they have expenses, and they have private school tuition, and they have a house and cars. And they're like, but I really want to pursue this thing. And I'm like, you really should. They're like, yeah, but I need to be making $500,000 in like the pre-seed stage of the company in order for this to work. And I'm like, well, that's just never going to happen. Like, zero people will invest in that. And if you can't self-finance, like this idea is going to sit on your shelf until somebody else does it. And, and I still think about it, that, my wife and I are both small business owners, and we do our best to keep a pretty lean, budget. We live an amazing life. Don't get me wrong, but the fixed cost part of what we do, like, we want to be as nimble as we possibly can, so that if that next opportunity arises and we have to go lean for a period of time, okay. And, that won't always be the case, but it's it's lifestyle by design. And if you are somebody who wants to be able to take risks, like, keep your budget as low as possible. If you're just getting out of school, do not get a nice car. Do not get a nice apartment. You are not in competition with your parents. Like,
It's
don't
tough.
try and move into, that neighborhood and impress people. Like,
It's tough.
Like, it limits your options. It limits your options so quickly.
You know why it's tough? Because you start making a little bit of money, you start going out to restaurants, so you like going to restaurants. And then all of a sudden you're ordering a glass of wine with dinner. And then all of a sudden, like, you're used to a glass of wine at dinner. Now, if you have to go start a startup and all of a sudden you say to yourself, well, now I can't have a glass of wine at dinner, you might not be able to enjoy that meal. And that's a bit of the problem. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, which is sometimes like don't get that glass of wine in the first place. Um, if you're serious about building a startup, and if you're serious about putting something out there, if you're serious about being a solopreneur or a multipreneur or whatever, keeping your costs down is another one of the greatest strengths that you can have.
Yeah, it gives you options,
It's
and
just tough though, because like
oh
wine is
no, it's
great.
absolutely great,
Yeah.
absolutely great. Which, by the way, thank you for the recommendation at Tilly's.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
in the Grand Caymans, Greg gave me a great recommendation. I took my wife there for her birthday, and it was fantastic. And we ordered a really great bottle of wine, and wanted to eat there basically every night. Uh, so, but to your point, right? We can't order, or we shouldn't order that bottle of wine on Tuesday.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like it's there, and it will taste just as good on Tuesday as it did for her birthday. But it is really hard to shed those habits if you get accustomed to them. And I think going back to our conversation about friends, that's where, in some ways, my experience, people stop being curious, people stop trying new things, people stop getting rejected because they're accustomed to life being a certain way. And trying a new thing, like downsizing to, for the chance to, supersize, I'm not so comfortable with that. And I think that if you have the chance to stay nimble longer, you have the chance to go a lot further.
Could not agree more. Someone who listens to the pod, actually, he's a Fortune 500 client, exec at a Fortune 100 maybe, and pays late checkout 7 figures a year. And he came to visit me in Miami, and I picked him up in my Volvo, which is like 6 or 7 years old, and he just starts laughing, and he's like, honestly, I did not expect you to be driving like a 7-year-old Volvo. And I was like, oh, I love this car. It's perfectly fine. Like it's safe. It works. Like I love it. And he goes, oh, I just figured, you would have like I don't know, a big Mercedes or a Bentley or a Lambo or whatever. And I do it because I do want to keep my costs down. And when there's opportunities that I'd rather take that money and grow my business versus like grow my burn rate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Grow your business, not your burn rate.
Yeah, literally. Andy, I could talk to you for hours. I want to thank you for coming on the show. I think you're criminally underfollowed, literally. It's a crime. So where could people get those journaling prompts and follow you on the internet?
Yeah. So AndyEllwood.com. And just the journaling tab is on the homepage. And I am at Andy Ellwood with 2 L's on all social platforms, and pretty easy to track down. If you type it out, it looks like and yell wood. Looks like, so when I walk into my boxing gym, people go wood.
And when you walk on the playa, people go boots.
exactly. But no, it's I try to be as generous as I can with the experiences that I've had. Post them on AndyEllwood.com, and then my newsletter is makeroom.fm, make room for many. So love to see people there.
All right, enjoy it, everyone. Later, Andy.
Thank you.